The Middle East finds itself teetering on the edge of a catastrophic conflict. For 6 days, a direct war between Israel and Iran has raged, a scenario long feared but now a grim reality. This began as a shadow war, fought through proxies and covert operations, but has exploded into open hostility with missile exchanges lighting up the skies over both nations. Israel has launched extensive airstrikes targeting Iran's critical military and nuclear infrastructure, striking deep inside Iranian territory. Sites around Tehran, the underground Natanz facility, and missile production centers have all been hit, as Israel aims to dismantle Iran's offensive capabilities before they can inflict further damage. The conflict has reached a critical and dangerous new phase, pulling the entire region, and indeed the world, toward a precipice. This escalation has now drawn the United States directly into the heart of the crisis. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump announced that he is seriously considering a U.S. military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. This dramatic statement marks a significant pivot away from earlier, albeit stalled, diplomatic efforts. The president's declaration followed an urgent national security meeting and a direct phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The rhetoric from the White House has become increasingly combative, with President Trump demanding Iran's unconditional surrender on social media. This shift suggests that the window for peaceful resolution is closing rapidly, replaced by the drumbeat of war. In response to President Trump's aggressive posture, Iran has issued a stark and unambiguous warning. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei declared that any American military intervention in the ongoing conflict with Israel would have serious, irreparable consequences. This was not mere political posturing, it was a clear threat. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman reinforced this message, stating that direct U.S. involvement would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region. Iran's message is simple. If the United States enters this fight, the conflict will not remain contained. It will spread, engulfing neighboring countries and potentially igniting a much larger, more devastating regional conflagration that would be difficult for anyone to control. The strategic calculations are now dangerously complex. Israel is actively pressuring the United States for direct military support. Specifically, it has requested America's most powerful bunker-busting bombs, which are needed to destroy Iran's deeply buried Fordow nuclear site, a target Israeli forces cannot reach on their own. In preparation, the U.S. has surged over 30 aerial refueling tankers to the region, a move that provides options for either supporting Israeli strikes or conducting joint U.S.-Israel operations. However, U.S. intelligence agencies have warned that Iran has the capacity to retaliate swiftly, targeting American bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE, where tens of thousands of U.S. troops are stationed, putting them directly in harm's way. Beyond the high-stakes political maneuvering and military strategy, the human toll of this conflict is already devastating and continues to grow with each passing day. The statistics paint a grim picture of loss and suffering. In Iran, the casualties have been significant, with reports indicating that over 224 people have been killed and another 1,800 have been injured in the Israeli airstrikes. In Israel, the constant barrage of Iranian missiles has resulted in more than 24 deaths and over 600 injuries. These numbers represent real people, families torn apart, futures destroyed, and communities living in a constant state of fear. The abstract language of war often obscures the profound and personal tragedy experienced by civilians caught in the crossfire. The daily lives of ordinary citizens in both countries have been completely upended. In Iran's capital, Tehran, the threat of further airstrikes has triggered mass evacuations, leading to chaotic scenes on the roads. Major highways are choked with traffic as families desperately try to flee to safer areas, creating immense fuel shortages and gridlock. The fear is palpable as basic services begin to break down under the strain. Grocery stores are rationing food, and the government has imposed severe internet disruptions, with bandwidth reportedly reduced by up to 80%. This digital blackout isolates the Iranian people, cutting them off from the outside world and from each other at a time of profound crisis. In Israel, while the Iron Dome and other defense systems have intercepted many incoming missiles, the psychological impact of the attacks is immense. Air raid sirens have become a constant feature of daily life, forcing families to repeatedly rush to bomb shelters. The sense of security has been shattered, replaced by an ever-present anxiety. Schools are closed, businesses are shuttered in high-risk areas, and the normal rhythms of life have ground to a halt. The constant threat from above creates a siege mentality, where every moment is filled with uncertainty about when and where the next attack will come, fundamentally altering the fabric of society. The economic consequences of this escalating conflict are also beginning to ripple outward, affecting not just the region, but the entire global economy. Fears of a wider war involving the United States, a major oil consumer, and Iran, a major oil producer, have sent shockwaves through international markets. The price of oil has already surged by nearly 5%, a direct reflection of the market's anxiety over potential disruptions to critical shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf. This spike in energy costs will inevitably be felt by consumers worldwide, leading to higher prices at the pump and contributing to broader inflationary pressures, demonstrating how a regional conflict can have far-reaching global economic impacts. Within the United States, President Trump's consideration of military action has ignited a fierce and deeply partisan debate, exposing the profound divisions over America's role in the Middle East. On one side, hawkish Republicans, such as Senator Lindsey Graham, are vocally supporting the president's tough stance. They argue that a decisive military strike is necessary to neutralize Iran's nuclear threat and demonstrate American strength and resolve. From their perspective, diplomacy has failed, and allowing Iran to continue its current path would pose an even greater danger to U.S. interests and regional stability in the long run. They believe that now is the time for action, not hesitation. However, this view is far from unanimous, even within the president's own party. A significant number of Republicans, alongside many Democrats, are sounding the alarm, warning against plunging the United States into another costly and protracted war in the Middle East. They recall the difficult lessons from past interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, and are wary of repeating those experiences. In a rare show of bipartisanship, members of Congress have introduced resolutions aimed at reasserting legislative authority over the use of force. These resolutions seek to require congressional approval before any offensive military strike can be launched against Iran, reflecting a deep-seated concern about an executive branch overstepping its constitutional bounds. The international community is watching the situation with growing apprehension, and key global powers are urging restraint. China's President Xi Jinping has stepped forward, offering to mediate the crisis and calling for a de-escalation of hostilities. This move signals Beijing's desire to play a larger role as a global peacemaker, and its concern over regional instability that could threaten its economic interests. Similarly, French President Emmanuel Macron has explicitly warned against pursuing military action with the goal of regime change in Iran. European allies are deeply concerned that a U.S. strike would not only fail to solve the problem, but would also unleash a wave of chaos with unpredictable and dangerous consequences. Diplomatic channels, which had been active just days ago, now appear to be all but closed. Efforts by intermediaries like Oman and Qatar to broker a ceasefire and find a path back to negotiations were pursued until June 16th, but ultimately failed to achieve a breakthrough. The hardening rhetoric from both Washington and Tehran has left little room for compromise. While an Iranian official cryptically remarked that diplomacy never ends, the current environment is dominated by military preparations and threats, not dialogue. The collapse of these diplomatic efforts has left the world holding its breath, as the primary actors move closer to a military confrontation that few, if any, truly want. The choice to engage in military action carries with it a weight of immense gravity, for the immediate consequences are often just the beginning of a long and perilous journey. A U.S. strike on Iran, even if intended to be limited and surgical, would likely unleash a chain reaction of retaliation and escalation that could prove impossible to manage. Iran would almost certainly target U.S. troops and assets across the Middle East, and its proxies could launch attacks on Israel and other American allies. This could quickly spiral into a full-scale regional war, drawing in neighboring countries and creating a humanitarian catastrophe far greater than what we are already witnessing. The path of war is rarely straight and almost never leads to the intended destination. The long-term consequences of such a conflict would reverberate for generations. A war would devastate Iran's infrastructure, economy, and population, but it would also come at a tremendous cost to the United States in both blood and treasure. It would likely entrench anti-American sentiment in the region, making future diplomatic engagement incredibly difficult. Furthermore, a military conflict could paradoxically strengthen the very hardliners it seeks to undermine, rallying the Iranian people around their government in the face of foreign aggression. History has taught us repeatedly that military intervention often creates power vacuums and breeds instability, planting the seeds for future conflicts rather than resolving existing ones. This moment demands a sober reflection on the true nature of strength. True strength is not merely the capacity to wage war, but the wisdom and courage to prevent it. While the threat posed by a nuclear-armed state is undeniably serious, the rush to a military solution overlooks the potential for unintended and catastrophic outcomes. The focus must remain on exhausting every possible avenue for peace, no matter how difficult or frustrating the process may be. Re-engaging in creative and persistent diplomacy, backed by a united international community, offers a far more promising path to a lasting and stable resolution than the blunt instrument of military force. Ultimately, the crisis between the United States, Israel, and Iran serves as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of peace and the profound responsibility of world leaders. The decisions made in the coming days will have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate battlefield. They will shape the future of the Middle East and define America's role in the world for years to come. The appeal must be to step back from the brink, to choose the difficult work of dialogue over the devastating certainty of war. For in the end, a peace that is painstakingly built is always more resilient and enduring than one that is forcibly imposed through violence.